Hello and welcome to the Mormon Yeshiva. This presentation is part of our Names Mean Things series. In this case, this presentation will be regarding the name Laman. Again, please make note of our fair use disclaimer. Everything here is only for educational purposes. The mystery of Laman. The name Laman is a name that has often caused much debate among scholars. Where does it come from? What does it mean? Why do we not see more instance of it or usage of it in the scriptures? Well, let's start from the beginning. In 1 Nephi 1:5, we see the first mention of the name Laman in the Book of Mormon. And it says, "And he came down," and he, being Lehi, came down by the borders near the shore of the Red Sea. And he traveled in the wilderness in the borders which are near the Red Sea. And he did travel in the wilderness with his family, which consisted of my mother, Sariah, and my elder brothers, who were Laman, Lemuel, and Sam. Now, when we are studying names, oftentimes names in Hebrew are associated not only with function, sometimes form, but definitely they have meanings behind the names. Well, we don't see the name Laman in its usage as an actual name in the Tanakh or the Old Testament. The word actually does appear in 2 Samuel 14:19. "And the king said, Is not the hand of Joab with thee in all this? And the woman answered and said, As thy soul liveth, my lord king, none can turn to the right hand." And in that particular scripture, the word right hand is Laman, or the left Samal, which from aught that my lord the king hath spoken. For thy servant Joab, he bade me, and he put all these words in the mouth of thine handmaid. 2 Samuel 14:19. So here we see the instance of the phonetic usage of the word Laman, as meaning right hand. So what we see is the right hand, or to the right, or is also to the south. Laman coming from the word Yaman, towards the right or the south, which is indicative because as Laman was the firstborn son, many times the firstborn sons are called the right hand, or to the right hand of the father. It's the idea of them being the right hand, or the heir of the particular, or of the father in this case, the father of the family, in this case Lehi. So let's take a look at it again. And if we look very closely within the text, we begin to see some of the poetic artistry in the Book of Mormon. First off, let's take a look where it mentions, everywhere it mentions Laman in this area, that you'll also see the mention of two other words, one of which we want to pay attention to is Red Sea. In the Torah, the Red Sea actually was translated Red Sea, but came from the word Yam Suf. So it says, for example, "And he came down by the borders near the shore of the Red Sea," Yam Suf. "And he traveled in the wilderness in the borders which are near the Red Sea," Yam Suf. "And he did travel in the wilderness with his family, which consisted of my mother, Sariah, and my elder brothers, who were Laman," Yaman, that's a little misspelled there, "and Lemuel and Sam." So Yaman, Yam Suf. Yaman, Yam Suf. You begin to hear some of the poetry behind the English, but you see the poetry in the Hebrew behind the English here in the text. And again, we also see this concept in the idea of where it relates it to the idea of the Red Sea and also to the south. And again, it came to pass that he called the name of the river Laman, and it emptied into the Red Sea, Yam Suf. And the valley was in the borders near the mouth thereof. And when my father saw that the waters of the river emptied into the fountain of the Red Sea, Yam Suf, he spake unto Laman, saying, "Oh, that thou mightest be like unto this river, continually running into the fountain of all righteousness." Now, in this particular point here, it is something interesting to note. There is a very symbolic meaning behind the name Laman in regard to the idea of toward the right, Okay, and also, which means toward the south, everything being oriented as if it were from the temple in Jerusalem, and a man facing east. Okay, so in this case, they went toward the right, toward the Yam Suf, toward the Red Sea. And in this case, it's also interesting to note that you'll see a very symbolic relationship if you look back to Genesis with the four rivers of Eden. But lest we diverge, the Lamanites, in a sense, were also connected to the land southward. We see in 1 Nephi 16:13, and it came to pass that we did take our tents and depart into the wilderness across the river Laman. And it came to pass that we traveled for the space of 4 days nearly a southeasterly direction. Notice the relationship and the placement between Laman toward the right or toward the south, and the idea that they traveled in a southeasterly direction. Okay, and it also in Alma 31:3 we see very similar usage. You'll see it in other passages in the Book of Mormon. But in Alma 31:3 it says, "Now the Zoramites had gathered themselves together in a land which they called Anshonim, which was east of the land of Zarahemla, which lay nearly bordering upon the seashore, which was south of the land of Gershon, and was also bordered upon the wilderness south, which wilderness was full of the Lamanites." So again, we see this interplay in this relationship between Laman, meaning to the right or toward the south, and also the idea of south, and also even we see a poetic usage that we've seen between Yam Suf and Yaman. But what is interesting is notice also this other word we have here. In those phrases, the left hand, Samal, meaning north. Samal, Sam, is also, besides being translated as Shem, name, it also is the short form of the direction to the north or to the left hand. So notice what it says here in Genesis 13:9. The right hand to the south, and of course, let's take a look. Is not the whole land before thee? This is where, Abraham and his nephew are looking, and they're, and they're getting to part ways. He says, "Separate thyself, I pray thee, from me. If thou wilt take the left hand, then I will go to the right. Or if thou depart from the right hand, Yaman, then I will go to the left, Samal." So what we're seeing, not only in the names of the sons of Lehi, we're seeing not only their actual names, we're also seeing sacred directions. And it gives us an orientation. It also has a very sacred and very ancient relational meanings connected with various other symbols like the tree of life, the Garden of Eden, a concept not known to many but in the Gentile world, but it's called the sons of the south or the children of the south, which we'll probably get to in another presentation. So what did he do? So notice the sacred directions. "And he came down by the borders near the shore of the Red Sea," Yam Suf, "and he traveled in the wilderness, in the borders which are near the Red Sea," Yam Suf, "and he traveled in the wilderness with his family, again, which consisted of my mother Sariah and my brother brothers who were Laman, Lemuel, and Sam." So Laman to the right or south, Sam to the left or to the north. But what about Lemuel? Well, here's what we find. The names actually do mean things. So they're part of the sacred directions. Laman toward the right or the south. Okay, Sam, the left hand or north, and Lemuel meaning toward God. Now the question is, from a Jerusalem orientation toward God would be the temple, specifically the Holy of Holies. Yet also, we also may see it in the sense of the rising of the sun as well. So it could be potentially the orientation of Jerusalem, the temple in Jerusalem, with right or the left being Jerusalem being like your center pivotal point, or pivot, their central point there on the compass, and then of course left and right. But the other one actually could also be that facing toward the east. But either way, we're getting the idea of sacred directions. But we also have to remember that this contains the Hebrew archetypal south. In other words, in Hebrew, we don't just have the 4 cardinal points, north, south, east, west. We actually have 6, which are north, south, east, west, up, and down. The present physical world that we live in is alluded to by the south. And also, the south is also associated with the idea of chesed, or loving kindness, or mercy, those type of things. So, in a very real sense, the name Laman actually does have a meaning, coming from the idea of the word Yaman, meaning the right hand. Okay, we see an interplay between his name and that of the Red Sea, Yam Suf. We also see its connection to the idea of the direction south, and the Lamanites being the land southward. All of these things are a poetic masterpiece, intricately interwoven, not only to paint a picture, but to communicate much deeper and more ancient knowledge than just the surface level tends to reveal. So, in this sense, names still really do mean things, and things were not done by accident. So I certainly hope you've